Welcome back to another episode of Straight Talking Leadership with me, Chris Pinkowski. My special guest today is Ashlee Cervantes Thomas. I mess that up? Did I get that right?
You nailed it, Chris. You nailed
Awesome.
it. It was perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let me introduce Ashlee. Ashlee is a seasoned security executive who is passionate about all things related to security solutions, physical risk mitigation, and management. Ashlee holds her master's in business administration from University of California, Davis. In her 15 plus year career, she has overseen hundreds of security professionals who specialize in armed security and executive protection. Ashlee is based in Northern California, where she serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Guardian Protection Force, Inc., as well as the founder of Guardian Secure Solutions, LLC, a full service technology based security operations center. Ashlee has built a legacy established by prioritizing core values each day to deliver the highest caliber security service to her community and customers. Her ultimate mission is to be the guardian of the communities she serves. Ashlee, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I will never get used to that. It's always so fun to hear somebody introduce me and nod accordingly. Like, oh, I did do that. Yes, that is what I do. Yes. Thank you for that great introduction.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show. So one thing that I like to do before we get into our conversation about leadership, this show is all about leadership, sharing lessons, tips, takeaways. But I always like to do a warm up called the Mad Minute. The Mad Minute
Okay.
is a couple questions that has absolutely nothing to do with leadership. It's all about just stimulating that gray matter between our ears to get us ready for a fun conversation.
I
Are you ready
love
for the
this.
Mad
I'm
Minute?
excited.
All
I
right.
think I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
That's right. You can't prepare for this. I never prepare anyone for the Mad Minute. So, question number one, you have access to a time machine for 24 hours. Do you
Ooh.
travel back in history or do you go sometime in the future?
Oh, that's wild. I One of my strengths is context. The Strengths Finder Gallup Institute, right? Like literally one of my top 5 strengths is context. So I definitely would go back in time. There's so many places I would want to visit in 24 hours. It would be pretty wild.
Is there one at the top of the list that you would absolutely want to go back and visit?
Man, I so my knee-jerk reaction is to witness our founding fathers signing the Constitution would be something just so surreal. But there's so many. But, yeah, the knee-jerk reaction is witnessing that day.
That it's funny because that would be my go-to, like, that's the top of my list, and especially being from Philadelphia, like, I've had
Mm,
so many, like, trips as a kid and then chaperoning trips with my kids to Independence Hall and seeing where our founding fathers met and created our Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. I would love to just be a fly on the wall and see how that
yep.
all unfolded.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Um, question number 2. What is one item that you absolutely can't live without?
Oh gosh, that is a great question. Uh, I hate to say this because I my grandfather called his cell phone an electronic leash, and that is how I feel, quite frankly. But because of the work that I do, it's my cell phone. If I were no longer in the roles that I'm currently in today, I would say the one thing I couldn't live without would be a hot shower.
Okay.
That's my decompression time, the steam, all of the things. But yeah, if we're talking like a specific item because of the work I do, my electronic leash, aka my cell phone.
Makes sense, especially given the work that you do, and, it's, I'm sure a lot of times things are time sensitive. You you've got a lot of sensitivity around the work that the people in your company do. So I can totally get that.
Yeah, and it's
Thanks for being
24/7,
yeah,
365. Yeah, it doesn't ever stop. So yes, yes.
yeah. Security doesn't sleep, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks for playing along with the Mad Minute. I
Absolutely.
always like to just do that to kind of break the ice and get us started.
I love it. That was a fun surprise.
Good. So now let's talk about leadership. That's why we're here. Um, so Ashlee, what got you into the security business? And you're the CEO of the company. You've been there for a while, but what initially drove you there? And then how did you progress into your leadership role?
Yeah, I have sort of a fun journey that I went on to get here today. And I'll start by saying, because this is a leadership podcast, I always knew I would be in leadership in some capacity. I think, I think this leadership is certainly a set of skills that people can learn, but I think there's also something very innate that is either in most people, like in some people, or not, right? And so,
Mhm.
as a very small child, that was always in me, the bossy girl, air quotes, right? But we won't start with my childhood. I'll fast forward a little bit, but I was working 3 jobs, right out of high school because I like nice things, and so, I was working 3 jobs. One of those jobs was in retail as a sales associate, for a large retailer, and I sort of got plucked out by happenstance, if you will, into loss prevention for that retailer, and so I was mentored by former law enforcement, retired military, like this just great group of men. It was all older men, and I was the only one on the team who looked like me. This young, I mean, I was still in my teens. This young Hispanic girl. And it turns out I was really good at catching people stealing. Ironically, people were sort of expecting me to be the one stealing rather than be the one catching people stealing. And so it ended up being this really unique journey that I went on. And so again, I was not planning a career in security at that time. I was actually in school to become a teacher with hopes and aspirations to maybe even move into educational leadership and maybe even become like a superintendent, work my way into educational politics. So I was a double major in political science and education, and this little journey just happened to unwind and unfold, and through a series of rather unique events, I ended up here at Guardian Protection Force, and the founder of our company just started, and I had worked for a smaller security company doing payroll and administration while I was kind of in college and doing some different things. This is like entry level administrative position, and I landed here at Guardian, sort of doing the same thing for Guardian Protection Force as a startup, and here I am, 14 years later as the CEO. So it's been a fun journey for sure.
That's wild. So it was never in the cards. It wasn't something that you thought about. It wasn't even necessarily something that you were passionate about, but the opportunity arose and you're like, I'll roll with it. Let's go. Let,
Yeah,
let's
it's
stop people from
interesting.
stealing things.
Yeah, it's interesting, even as like a younger girl, I was always, again, this was part of the leadership. I tended to lean into those leadership roles in friend groups and in, academic circles, or even my athletics, I was the captain, or whatever it may be, but I was always that kid, that girl specifically, that was like, "Ooh, guys, that doesn't feel safe," or "Oh, don't you forgot to lock the door," when, oh, my college roommates, bless them, those girls, we drove each other nuts because I was always that obsessive person, like, "You can't leave the window open. What's wrong with you?" I mean, I was born and raised in South Sacramento, which many people don't even know is, Sacramento is the capital of California. South Sacramento is what some people maybe refer to as like the wrong side of the train tracks. And
Okay.
so I spent some time in rougher neighborhoods growing up, and so I'm sure it just all these things kind of boiled together ended up um, becoming the context and the foundation for what I do today. But yeah, it was never something I dreamt up. I definitely just sort of leaned into what was presented to me time and time again, and here we are.
All right. So growing up in a neighborhood that people would consider like the wrong side of the tracks. I also grew up in the inner city of Philadelphia. You know, very working class neighborhood. It wasn't super rough, but it also wasn't like a cakewalk. And
Yeah.
I attribute the level of street smarts that I have to my upbringing. And,
Yeah.
I'm always like head on a swivel. What's going on? It's something that I've instilled in my own kids. We very purposefully lived in the city when we first had kids because I thought like street smarts are something that will carry you through life and it applies in so many different ways. And it wasn't until my kids were a little older that we moved out to the suburbs and we needed more space. I've got 3 boys and they have energy and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
But how do you think growing up like that, how much of that affected your ability to kind of see things, predict like that looks like a sketchy character and I want to
Yeah.
keep my eye on him. Like street smarts, how did that play into where you are now?
Oh yeah. What a packed question. So
Yeah.
I will say this. So I grew up and I went to school in my area. I went to schools in my area. So, I the people I grew up with, for the most part, were from where I was from. And so it wasn't until I got to college and I was very, very, very blessed. I went to a private Christian university, small little university down in Southern California. Um, and I had no idea that there were people from places not like where I was from. And so I got there, and one of the things again, going back to my college roommates, right? They would leave their purse hanging off the chair at a restaurant, and it would drive me bonkers, and I was like, "Someone is going to steal that." And they're like, "Why would somebody who's gonna steal, like, we're at a nice restaurant." And I'm like, "That's exactly why somebody's going to steal that." And so it's funny, I think having that exposure to this really, in so many ways, polar opposite environment, and it was this little bubble. I mean, this little bubble where on campus, I got very relaxed on campus. I sort of, you know, eh, it only took, a couple years before some of those default settings were sort of reversed. And there was a few instances where I was off campus and I had to get kind of harsh reminders back to reality, right? And I had a
Mhm.
few situations that I got myself into, and I was so angry with myself because I knew better. And yet, you are what you eat, you are the environment that you're in. And so it's fascinating though, having had that perspective. Now I feel like I can take such better care of my clients who maybe aren't from where I'm from. My clients who really don't have an understanding of, what hazards might be out there, what potential threats might actually be out there. And so it's really, I think, where my passion for this comes from is where I'm from. And so that, yeah, it's such a packed question, but I love that you mentioned, you have three boys. I have two boys, and my husband and I were both, born and raised in South Sacramento, and we joke all the time that my oldest son was born in our home in South Sacramento, our first home that we had bought. And we actually, the decision to move was another fun story for another day, but ultimately, long story short, there was a series of events that reminded us how unsafe the neighborhood was, and once we had a child, we were like, "It's time to go." So we ended up moving, and now we live in a city that is actually rated the safest city in all of California, which is just so polar opposite. So we live in the woods, we live in the middle of nowhere, and so my younger son was born there, so he's never lived anywhere else. And we joke all the time that you can take the kid out of South Sac, but you cannot take the South Sac out of the kid. Sometimes these boys, they're feral. And I'm like, what is it? Like, how you don't know this life? Like, you don't know that, you don't know where you come from. You don't understand. Even my older son
That's
was
right.
young when we moved. And yet somehow I'm like, no, it's true. So I don't know. Maybe it's because of how we parent, right? I don't believe it's actually genetic, but
Yeah.
maybe it's how we parent. You talk about having your head on a swivel, and there's just some different things. I mean, my kids, like, they're constantly with the Nerf guns running around like, oh, we gotta beat up the zombies. Like the zombies are coming. And I'm like, how do you know? They know how to position, they know how to hold it. I'm like, I don't know how you know this. I did not teach you this. I don't know why this is so innate for you, but it is.
Y
So
Well, good. I mean, somewhere they picked it up, and it'll serve them, well in the future. I think about that for my oldest son because I guess he's 18. We moved out of the city 7 years ago, so he was 11. So he got a good chunk of time living in the city. Um,
yeah.
but he will be going to college in September back down in the city. And
Ooh,
he hangs out with some friends down there, so I'm happy that he's gotten some of those street smarts and he's
yeah.
cautious and he hears the stories that I've talked about like growing up and hey, when we go to the store, even though we're out in the suburbs, when they were younger, we would do the like the 5 and 25 game. All right, what's
Mm,
5 yards around us? What's 25 yards around us? What looks out of
that's a great
place?
game. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it just gets them thinking like, "Ah, okay, that is
Yeah.
I gotta be
Yeah.
aware of my surroundings."
That's a great game. I'm gonna play that game with some of my clients.
There you go. Um, Another fun one, and then we can move back to the leadership stuff, but it ties in, is, when they're standing in line at the cashier,
Mhm.
after you leave, ask, "What was the name of the cashier?" I mean, they're all wearing a name tag, but again, it's just like a paying attention kinda thing.
Mhm.
But from a leadership standpoint, this is something that my kids are also used to, but when we go out to dinner, whoever is serving you always comes up and introduces themselves by name. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm going to take care of you today. So they used to ask when I would say, hey, Chris, can we get some more water over here? Hey, how do you know that guy? Do you know that person? Like, but no, they introduce themselves. So
Yep.
everyone likes to be called by their name. And that is a
Mhm.
leadership thing, right? It's
Yeah.
being purposeful and being able to engage with people.
Yeah. I love that you said it tied back in because it really does. I think the best leaders are the best observers. And so in my experience, in the same vein, the best leaders are the ones who are able to pick up the mic and talk when they need to, but they can also, kind of sit down, shut up, and listen.
Mhm.
So in the same vein, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there.
Yeah. The old saying is we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so use them accordingly.
Yes, I
And
love that.
and you're right. So from a leadership standpoint, how how big of an organization are you leading right now?
Yeah, so we're at about 100 security professionals with Guardian Protection Force. And then my new startup, which you so eloquently introduced, Guardian Secure Solutions. My vision for that, it's a technology based company. And so my vision for that company is we won't ever have hopefully more than 10 employees, is really the goal there. So we leverage technology and across, multiple platforms and in all kinds of cool ways. But right now, that organization is at uh, 5 employees, a couple part-time, so but 3 full-time employees and then 2 part-time.
All right. And when you're do you ever have the occasion where you're giving like a town hall to your entire workforce. And
Yeah.
how are you engaging with those 100 plus people that kind of in some way, shape, or form report to you?
Yeah. Guardian Protection Force, we training is really the pillar of what sets us apart from our competition. So we take our training of our security professionals, our executive protection. Just for anybody that maybe isn't familiar with the industry, is the industry term for bodyguards. What many of you listening in know as bodyguards. So again, we specialize in armed security and executive protection. So we take that training really seriously. We do monthly training for our staff. So in a town hall forum, I'm addressing them on a monthly basis. Um, my pre-COVID, we all of those trainings were in person. Since COVID, obviously during COVID, everything went virtual. Although we never shut down, we did try to implement as much, safe distancing and things like that as possible. So we continued operating, but we transitioned whatever we could to virtual. So since we were sort of coming out of, knock on wood, right, the COVID era, we have decided to keep a hybrid version for our training. So we sort of split the training, and we do one virtual option and then one in-person option. And our officers and executive protection agents are required to attend so many in person, but they can attend some virtually. So there's some more flexibility there, which has been really cool. So yeah, I'm addressing them monthly. And then my startup is a startup. So like having a newborn, I'm interacting with those employees almost every day.
Mhm.
We operate, similar. It's still security, so we operate 24/7. So we do kind of a similar monthly, like connecting as a small team for Guardian Secure Solutions, but we have touch points every day across the teams, but not all together.
Okay. And so, do you have any favorite ways of making sure that when you're having those monthly town halls, and I'll focus on the larger group for right now, 100
Yeah.
people, you're doing, hybrid and in person. Do you have any favorite ways or ways that you found to be super effective to make sure that what you're saying to people, they're completely understanding and they walk out of that room knowing exactly everyone's on the same page. This is our mission and we're moving forward.
Yeah, I will tell you, this is such a fun question because I really was challenged during COVID, which is when the founder of Guardian Protection Force decided to step back. Was during that season and named me CEO. And so I had had various different roles in the company prior to stepping into that role. So our founder was founder and CEO for the first, gosh, it's been 2 years now. So for the first 12 years of business, and he decided to step back, and so his title now is founder and COO, but he is overseeing our intelligence division, which is the wing. We're a licensed private investigations firm, and that's the wing that oversees all of the executive protection work that we do. And there's a few other smaller components that he oversees. So that's all he does exclusively now, where I oversee kind of the broader big picture of all of the different divisions within the organization. So with that, I'll say, um, the challenge for me during COVID was, how do I do that? How do I successfully convey this message virtually? And
Mhm.
so friendly reminder, a little bit from my context, I went to school to be a teacher. So it's something I'm really passionate about. It's something I'm working into becoming a professional speaker outside of my own company with my own clients and prospective clients and employees. But it was so challenging in the beginning. How do I engage? I mean, the same thing every speaker sort of struggled with during COVID once we transitioned everything to virtual. And so even still today, when we allow our folks to be virtual, it is still a hump that I am working through. So I won't say I have the magic pill and I figured it all out, but there are certainly things that we have done that have really helped. So I loved your Mad Minute. We sort of do something a little bit similar. We do an engagement session virtually. It was something we did unofficially in person, right? Because when people come in, we always had food, we always had connection time before we all sat down and got to work, right? So we just sort of took that and made it a little bit more structured, and brought people in from the very beginning. So I think that's really the first step. And I can say I've got that down pat now. That's
Okay.
only the first step though. So from there, that continual engagement and requesting a feedback that is so much more challenging when you're doing it virtually. But when I'm in person, I can say I feel really confident I can nail that. I can check for, I'm studying facial expressions.
Mhm.
I'm looking for signs of engagement. I'm pulling I people know when I'm instructing that they better be on their P's and Q's, because I'm going to ask the person who's least expecting it the question that they need to know the answer to, right? All of those pieces. So I think it's a little bit of teacher skills. I think it's a little bit of really having that passion for whatever it is that you're doing yourself, because that's energy and that's contagious. And people can tell, they know when you're not excited and you're not passionate about what you're
Yeah.
doing, and there's no way they're gonna, even if they were excited and passionate about it before, your energy can mesh with that and actually, fizzle their own excitement. So that's something I'm really conscientious of.
You're right, and I wanna stay on that topic for a second because the energy that we bring to the table or to the room as a leader really does set the tone. People know when you're just walking through the motions, maybe your voice is flat, you're not making the hand gestures or whatever. Um,
Mhm.
but what what are some tricks or tips that you would give to somebody who's like, I need to bring it even when I don't feel like bringing it?
Mm.
How do you how do you make sure that you're on your A game when you're talking to your group of employees?
So I have a personal mission statement, and truly, again, I have two very active small boys. I work in a profession that is going 24/7, 365. Um, I am tired a lot of the time. A lot of the time. We're on, like, a no sleep bender. It's been, like, a year since my oldest has slept through the night in his own bed.
Okay.
So I am very tired, and so, 1, I'm honest about that, and all of my team members, they know, and I tell them, in advance, like, "Hey, we had a really rough sleep night." See, I can barely talk. We've had a couple rough sleep nights the last couple days. But my team knows, "Hey, I'm struggling." Um, and truly, that mission statement, that core value that I have to be the guardians of the communities and clients that we serve, that's what gets me out of bed every day. Sometimes it's a little later than I'd like it to be, but ultimately, that passion that burns inside me is that's it. And my advice to people, and I tell my own team this all the time with so much love and respect. This is not meant to be condescending or threatening in any way, but if this is not the thing that gets you excited to get out of bed every morning, please go somewhere else. Like, I don't want anybody on this team. I don't want anybody listening to this. I don't want you in a job, in a career that you are not passionate about, because so much of what is wrong with our world is people doing things they don't give, I'm not going to curse here, but the two
You can though.
hoots about. Okay, two shits about. Like, don't do something you don't care about. Again, I live in Sacramento. It's the capital of California. Again, for the people that don't know, because a lot of people are like, "Wait, I thought Hollywood was the capital of California." No, Sacramento.
Yeah.
We have a beautiful little capital. It's gorgeous. Come visit anytime. But we have, I think, something like, don't quote me on this. It's like 60% of the workforce in Sacramento works for the government.
Okay.
And so I come from a family of civil servants. Everybody in my family worked for the government. I don't have a single adult family member who has not or does not currently work for the government. Most of them have retired out, like my older generations, right? They retired out of civil service. And the amount of people, not in my family, of course, but the amount of people that work in civil service, they don't care about the department that they're in's mission statement. They don't even maybe even understand what the greater department that they're in is doing. And they show up every day or don't show up half the time because they have lots of protections as union workers. They don't even have to show up to keep their job, but they don't care. And ultimately, they're not fulfilled happy people because they're doing something every day or trying to figure out how to get out of doing something every day that they
Mhm.
don't care about. I had a very, very short, minuscule stint working for the government. And in that time, I'll just briefly share some of the things I saw. I saw people with stacks of paper inches thick that would pile up on their desk. And when their supervisor would come around and say, like, hey, what's the status on this? Like, what's going on? Like, hey, that looks like a little like a hefty stack. Oh, yeah, yeah, I'll get to it. Don't worry. I'm working on it this week. And I have seen with my own eyes that stack of applications, maybe it's nurses. Maybe these are nursing applications. Let's just say, I won't say that's what it was, but let's just say it was nurses, people trying to become nurses, trying to go do good in the world. Take the stack, oops, and drop it in the shred bin. Right? Like literally because they didn't want their supervisor to see that they hadn't processed this stack of paperwork and now it's just gone. So when you call, if you ever called the government and they say, "Oh, looks like we may have lost your," I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying that does happen. I'm saying I've seen it happen. So again, I think I have this sort of saying and mantra that I'm trying to instill in my children, and I've certainly said to myself enough times over the years. Quitters never win and winners never quit. But sometimes winners, we shelve an idea or we put something away and we say like this isn't the time for that. Along the same lines, like go big or go home, and it's okay to go home. Like what a beautiful world would we live in if everybody was going big or they were at home recharging, recalibrating for the next big thing that they wanted to do. And I think that's where we get lost a lot of the times is we don't want to step back from something because we don't want it to look like we failed or we quit or we gave up. But knowing what no longer serves you is a leadership trait. Like I think understanding
Absolutely.
that it's okay to not do something or step back from something if that fire goes out, because sometimes flames go out and it's time to pivot and find something new. But yeah.
You're absolutely right, and it's having the mindset of it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And,
Yeah.
there are gonna be times that you don't win all the time, like, nobody wins all the
Yep.
time. But if you
Yep.
can learn from it and then move on to something that you're more passionate about or take that lesson, come back and do it better another time, um,
Yep.
that is also like a leadership mindset or a high performer's mindset. Um, I will so I work with leaders in all different levels of organizations, sizes of organizations, and I'll get these high performers that will get frustrated and we'll have the conversation about the win or learn mindset. And they'll still be frustrated. And I'll ask them, do you know who Michael Jordan is? Well, yeah, I know who
Mhm.
Michael Jordan is. Would you argue that he's, if not the best, one of the best basketball players to ever play? Well, yeah. And I'll say, do you know what his shot percentage is? No. His career shot percentage is 52%. So basically, one out of every two shots he took, he made. But you can say that he's the best, but he only made half the shots. The goal
Yeah.
is he learned and he didn't give up and he chased his passion. Basketball was his passion. So if that's what you're
Yeah.
passionate about, then let's go. Let's do it. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so you and I share that in common. I had a little stint in the government as well. Um, I volunteered for a campaign in 2011 for someone who was running for city council in Philadelphia. And all I wanted to do was experience what's a campaign like. And two people that I respected a whole lot introduced me to this candidate. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna work to get this guy elected. So he gets elected and then asked me to join his team. I'm like, I'm a private sector guy, I'm a business guy. I don't know if I'm going to play well in the government. And he said, no, I part of my platform is, you know, revitalizing Philadelphia as a place to do business. So I need someone with a business mindset. Okay. And I spent 2.5 years on his team, I saw things that I can't unsee about how things
Yeah.
operate within the government
Yeah.
and the stacks of paper. I can attest to the story you just told. I've seen it with my own eyes, and yes, things get lost,
Yep.
and it's for people's own self-preservation. It's because
Yeah.
people hate their jobs. And
Yeah.
if you are in a job that you hate, go find something else. There,
Please.
yeah,
Please.
please. There's nothing worse than
Yeah.
spending. How much time do we spend working every day and
Yes.
be miserable about it?
Yes.
Like, there's more to
And
life.
there's way too many opportunities out there. I mean, there's way too many opportunities out there for you to do, and everyone's going to have a rough day now and then, right? There's a difference, and you have to be able to have the wherewithal to be able to look introspectively enough to know the difference for yourself, because nobody on the outside can knows that.
That's right.
Nobody except for you, but you have to be the leader of your own life, if nothing else, and say, you know what, this is not for me right now, this is not for me maybe ever again. I don't know, but I'm gonna shift and pivot, and please, please, please do
Yes,
that.
I could not agree more. The old saying is, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yes.
So, let's do the things we love, be the best leaders that we can be in something that fuels us, that we're passionate about. Because that's the other thing too, is when you're standing up in front of your team, whether it's a team of 5 or it's an organization of 100, if you're passionate about what you're talking about, the chances of you bringing your A game to that conversation is so much higher.
Yeah.
You're not forcing yourself. You're not like, "Oh, man, give me 5 minutes. I know I've got to do like a whole routine of breathing and stretching, and I got to get
Yeah.
myself in the mindset." No. If you're doing what you're passionate about, it comes through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. I talk so often my role as a CEO, my whole job, if I am doing things the right way, is to get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. That's
Yes.
it. That's my job. I'm not even the bus driver. Like, I don't even steer the bus. I am the bus facilitator. And I don't need to rotate the tires on the bus. I don't need to change the oil on the bus. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not, my whole job, if I'm doing it correctly, is to find the right people, get them on the bus and then in the right seats and in the right positions, and to identify the people who maybe don't want to be on the bus anymore, or maybe they aren't aligned with where the bus is going anymore. And maybe they were for a long time. And that is the hardest part of my job, is like, okay, now it's time. This person that I've had this relationship now with for maybe 5 or 7 years, and it's time for me to help move them off the bus, and take their belongings, and drop them off, hopefully at a spot that will serve them as well, right? I'm not just going to kick them off the bus and say, good luck to you. If I am doing my job well, then that is all I should be doing. And
Mhm.
there have been seasons where I have nailed that job, and there have been seasons when I have royally screwed that job up. And they're both will come again, undoubtedly, right? But
Mhm.
ultimately, I will say I've taken, my time with Guardian Protection Force and all of the different roles that I've spent, and all the things that I've learned, and this was I was so excited to start my startup, Guardian Secure Solutions. And really, I can't wait for my team over there to listen to this. I have not done a lot of work on Guardian Secure Solutions. Like, what I will say, I've come to a place in my career where I've really identified, okay, my job over here really is just to get the right people. And right now, I've got an amazing bus driver. I've got some awesome people on that. It's a little bus, it's a short bus, but it's
Yeah.
okay. We're doing the things, and we're going places. It's slow moving bus, but we're getting there, and it's been so exciting to sort of watch that unfold. Whereas with Guardian Protection Force, and I imagine most of the people listening maybe can relate to this as well. I've come up in this organization, right? At Guardian Protection Force, I came up I started as an HR payroll admin person. I moved up and I took over the human resources department, and then I moved up into business development, and then very begrudgingly I transitioned into operations, which I really thought I would be terrible at. Fun fact, I wasn't. I actually really loved it. That was actually, looking back on all of the different roles I've held, that was actually probably my favorite role. Also the most demanding and not something I ever want to do again, but it was a really incredible opportunity, and I really was inclined to say no. And the way things worked out, I am a little bit of a yes woman, and so I was like, "You know what? We're gonna see what happens. This might be the end of my career, but I'm gonna see what happens." That's sort of what I told myself. And it wasn't. And that, if I had not taken that opportunity, there's no way I would be in the seat I'm in now, nor would I be any good. I mean, not any good, but I would not be as good as I am in this role as CEO if I hadn't said yes to that opportunity. So, and all that to say, I think my default and where I get myself into trouble is, instead of doing my job on that Guardian Protection Force bus of orchestrating, coordinating the people, I default back into being the mechanic, changing the tire, because I've done that before and I know how to do it. And then as a leader, that's where I really, really screw up, because yeah, the tire is going to get changed correctly because I know how to change the tire. But I am not serving my team in that moment, right? If any, I'm
Mhm.
harming them really. And so that's been a really hard lesson that I've had to learn time and time again. And I'll probably have to learn it a couple more times, but
So I love that analogy, and it's it's so true. But one of the things that it's a balancing act for leaders where we've got to kind of give up some things and empower our people because that's how they grow and that's how they become better. But it's sometimes hard for us to let certain things go because we know, hey, I've been in that job. I know I can do it faster. You know, I can walk circles around people. But how do you kind of step back and say, you know what? I'm not going to run circles around someone today
yeah.
because the more I let them take ownership, accountability, level up their own skills, it helps the entire organization. It helps me to be a better CEO. So, what are some of the things and I think that the listeners and the viewers would really appreciate this because a lot of leaders struggle with it. Do you have any internal mechanisms that like is the foot on the brake because you feel yourself getting into the seat of the bus and you're like, no, no, no.
It is hard. I I will say I'm hopeful my team will, at least some of my team members will want to listen to this. So I want to speak to them, and then I'll speak to the rest of the audience. And here's
Yeah.
what I'll say. I always try to weigh out what's the win over what would the could the loss be, right? So that is something I am very conscientious of. With that being said, I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt and what they can accomplish, but I want to balance that with being realistic about my expectations. So one of the biggest mistakes I have made, and I have made it too many times to count, is putting somebody in the wrong seat, if you will, putting them in a position that they were not ready for, because I believed in them so much and I knew that they have the potential. I know they can get there, but it is not fair to them or anyone else on this bus, on this team, when I do that. And so back to your point, I think that's where leaders get themselves into trouble, right? If you truly can run circles around somebody, that tells me that they are not equipped, they are not trained. Like, yeah, leader, you're really great at something, but truly, are they ready for the thing you're trying to give them if you can run circles around them? And so that's what I sort of have spent a lot of time and energy reflecting on just in the recent couple of years. And I actually just had this conversation with one of my team members who is I have so many team members like this, but a great example, like so ambitious, so driven, so talented, and has so much potential. And I know, like, if they apply themselves, they could have my job in 5 years' time, right? Like, I know but I also know that they're not ready for the next thing yet. And I
Yeah.
know, and so that's where I think as a leader, we have to be really careful because sometimes we scoop people along because we don't want to lose them, right? Because we know we see their potential, we know they can get there. But if we're not equipping them, that's when there's, it's almost like kind of like let's lift up the lid and look at what is really happening here. If you really can run circles around this person, are they really, maybe it's not that they're the wrong person for the job, maybe it's that they don't have the right tools, or they haven't had enough time. And so in that instance, then that's where the coaching comes into play. And I think the best leaders are the best coaches. I was a head coach for a pretty competitive high school program for almost a decade, and I think that experience really gave me so many of the skills. It's funny, people ask me like, "Oh, what's the thing that best equipped you to become a leader?" That's always my answer. I was a high school coach, and I tell you what, that when I went from assistant to head coach, that transition, I was not equipped. I was not prepared. There is no funding. There is no protocol. There is no program for training. I was thrown to the wolves, and I either was going to sink or swim. And I'm a survivor, so I decided to swim. But man, sinking would have been a lot easier. um, so so with that, I say, I think for leaders listening, of really being able to do that inventory, but not just of yourself, of your team, and understanding. I'm a big fan of strengths. Again, the Gallup Strengths Quest. Really understanding what your team's core strengths are, but that isn't it, right? You can't just say like, oh, these are your strengths, so now this is the job you can do. I think there's so much more that needs to go into it if we're going to equip the next generation of leaders, which is, I think, hopefully every leader's goal,
It,
really is to be replaced at some point.
it should be
Hopefully.
every leader's goal.
Yeah.
But you're right. So it is a combination of resources. Like, okay, if I as a leader want that person to be the subject matter expert and be able to run laps around me in that
Hmm.
situation. So what tools do they need? What resources do they need? What training? What motivation?
Hmm.
I've I've also seen leaders, and it kind of comes back to the right seat on the bus, but they they will see someone who's a high performer and say, "You seem to be really good at this, and I want to promote you over here." But at the end of the day, that person doesn't want to be promoted over there. They love
Yeah.
what they're doing here, and they're killing it. And as soon as you promote them without getting that buy-in, that's when they're like, "Man,
Hmm.
I was happy just doing what I did, but because you're the boss and you asked me to do this, I felt compelled
Yeah.
to do it."
Yeah.
And that is so counterproductive. So
Hmm.
making sure that your people, like when you want them to level up, making sure that they want the same thing is so
Yeah.
important.
Yes.
Um, because there are people that want to work a lot and they want to build their careers. And there are other people that are like, you know what? I want to clock out at 4 o'clock and I want to be
Yep.
home by 4:30 with my feet up.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I just want
Yep.
to pay the bills and live my life.
Yeah. And I think that all comes down to two factors for leaders listening, in my experience. Again, I'm not the expert here, but in my experience, the two things that will prevent you from understanding your team in that way are accessibility and communication, right? If you are not accessible as a leader, and or you are not able to communicate effectively with your team, or your team is not able to effectively communicate with you, that's where leaders get themselves into trouble in that exact scenario. And
Yes.
it happens to me. It happens to me, right? We get overloaded. But so I think going back to like what are the traits that are most important for leaders listening, at least in my experience, has been I have to manage my calendar. I cannot overload my calendar because then I become an ineffective communicator and I become inaccessible to my team. And that's when I get myself in really big trouble. If
Mhm.
I love one of my favorite leadership coaches, her name is Ann Laguza. You can find her on Instagram. I don't get a kickback for that saying that, but she's been my coach and my mentor for a very long time. She's phenomenal. And one of the things she says that really has hit home for me again and again is if you don't have time to have regular check ins, regular one on ones with the people on your team, then you have too many people on your team or you have too much on your plate. And that is rung true again and again. And I tell you, like, I've gotten myself into trouble with this so many times, right? And I get people that are like, just like you were describing, like they're high performers, they're doing what they need to do. I feel like I don't really need to check in on them. Well, and then here we are. Maybe it'll be 6 months, maybe it'll be a year, maybe it'll be 2 years, but it's gonna bubble up, and I'm either gonna lose that person, and or they're gonna drop a lot of balls in the process, and then I'm gonna be even busier cleaning up the messes that they made, eh, be it intentionally or unintentionally, because they did not have access and effective communication with me. And so really what I've when we talk about like leaders having a hard time giving up and delegating, what I've learned in that is like I've got a few key trusted people that I brought on, and I'm like, I'm going to pour into you, and I expect you to pour into the next right to the next level of people. And so forget your org chart, forget what that looks like. You figure out like what do you have time and energy for? And energy is important too, because there are some people where it's like they're great team members, but, like, my energy level just maybe doesn't mesh quite well with theirs,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
being able to identify that and say, like, "I don't need to be your direct leader, like, I need to give you a good leader," and so if I can pour into these 3 leaders, and then these 3 leaders can pour into the next 10 people across, their schedules. So I think just really owning that is so important, but access and communication. If you don't have that with your people, then you're not really a leader. Like, I hate to say that so harshly, but if your people can't access you and you can't communicate with them and vice versa, you're somebody doing things and telling people what to do. That's not the same as being a leader though.
I couldn't agree more. And so I always say that relationships or sorry, communication is the foundation of leadership.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people misunderstand a lot is that communication is a two-way street. It's not just me telling you things. It's me taking in what you're saying to me. So
Yeah.
it's the giving and receiving of information.
Yeah.
But then the relationship part, coming back to accessibility, is all right, knowing your people and genuinely caring about your people, being there for them, adjusting your style. Like as leaders, we need to be fluid because
Yeah.
you and I, we may be on the same energy level, but this person here needs me to slow it down. They need me to
Yes.
break the ice for an extra 2 minutes when we're having our one-on-one. And how's the family? What's going on? Etc.
Yeah.
The other person, they just want to get right to business. All right, let's get down to it. Brass tacks.
Yes.
So you need to have that level of emotional intelligence as a leader to fluctuate and be as effective with everybody that you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I
Mhm.
saw something. I'm terrible. My memory's fried now, but it was an article that was basically talking about how EQ is the new IQ specifically for leaders. Like really your intelligence level does essentially it was kind of saying it doesn't really matter, which of course I don't fully agree with that. I think you need to be able
Yeah.
to kind of do some things, but really that EQ is so much more that emotional intelligence is so much more valuable. Those soft skills, those things that are really hard to teach in a classroom are so much more valuable in leadership roles than anything else really.
They really are. And the beauty there is that our IQ, we're generally born with the IQ that we have throughout in our entire life, right? It may
Yeah.
move within a couple points up or down, but your EQ is something that you can continuously develop.
Yeah.
So no one is born with a high level of emotional intelligence. But when you're willing to put in the time and become more self-aware and
Yeah.
go through all the exercises that bring those soft skills to the table, you're absolutely right. That is such a determining factor. I've seen that in so many studies that the high performers, the high achievers, one thing that sets them apart is their emotional intelligence and the way that they're able to navigate all kinds of situations.
I know we're running low on time, but I just want
Yeah.
to I did my MBA. I graduated with my MBA in 2017, and at that time at least the UCs, right? The universities of California, which are the more prestigious, if you will, universities in California. And there's a whole bunch of them. I graduated with my MBA from UC Davis. But they were trying, those MBA programs were trying so hard to figure out how do we encapsulate and teach soft skills, because they see, right? They see where things are headed. They understand that if they're going to equip the next leaders, that they can't just teach statistics and
Mhm.
accounting, right? Like it's really, and it was so cool to watch because it was really, at least for UC Davis. I mean, obviously I can't speak to all of them, but my understanding, and I spoke with our chancellor and our dean, quite a bit when I was there, and so really kind of hearing where their understanding of where the direction that MBAs needed to go, um, and the value that they need to be able to add for students to continue driving people to want to spend these absorbent amounts of money to get their
Mhm.
MBA, and then to equip, right? Because then you get the notoriety. Once you equip the future leaders, they go out, they lead, they tell people that's where they came from, right? It's this whole cycle. But it's fascinating that exactly what you're saying is really where I see I don't know how far they've come, because I'm done with that. I'm never going back to school ever again. But yeah, thank you for letting me go down that rabbit hole with you.
Absolutely. And Ashley, we have been talking for a while. This has been such a fantastic conversation. I do have one final question, and then we'll start to wrap things up. But share with me and with the listeners and viewers, what is your leadership philosophy?
I love that question, and you did give me a heads up that you were going to ask it, and I feel like I sort of already said it, so I want to recap it, and
Mhm.
hopefully it makes sense. But I just, in a nutshell, feel that if we all wake up every single day and we do the thing that, whatever you call it, if you call it God, if you call it the universe, if you call it, Buddha, Ali, whatever you call it, if something has been placed on your heart, trusting that it's there for a reason, and really just following that, everything flows so much better from there. And so when it comes to being a leader, or a leadership philosophy, if you will, I really think it boils down to one thing, and that's passion. I think do what you're passionate about, and don't do what you're not passionate about. Because it just, everyone is so much better off when we are pursuing the things that we're passionate about. And I've had people on my own team, and people that I friends and colleagues that I've encountered that, but I don't know what I'm passionate about. That's okay too.
Mhm.
But stop doing something that you're not passionate about, because that's the quickest way to find it, right? We all need a paycheck. We all want a paycheck. And if you cut that out, because I think that's where, and even when you were mentioning, like, sometimes, like, we promote the person and they're just willing to go along with it because, you ask them, and maybe they like you as a leader. Maybe they did it because of the money. And that is just so hard for me, right? Like, I get it. Inflation's crazy, everything's so expensive. We have families to feed, we have mortgages to pay, we have things to do. I get it. And I promise you the money will come if you lean into what you're passionate about, right? And so I don't build businesses to make money. And I've been really transparent about that in my startup, and my work here with the founder of this company. And like, I'm not in a business to make money. I'm in a business to do what I love, and the money will flow from there. And I just trust that. And there's no, that's it. Like, I put it out into the universe, and I this was so cool. And this happened earlier this year. We set benchmarks here at Guardian Protection Force for revenue, and think we're not a nonprofit, right? So we we set our revenue, and we measure in this business by billable hours, right? Because our people are our product. So how many hours can we bill? So let's just say, for number's sake, like the number last year was 100. Well, we didn't hit 100 in 2023. We hit like 92. So then let's say, for this year, let's say we bumped it up, because this is who I am fundamentally as a person. I said, well, I know we didn't make 100 last year, but we're going to hit 115 this year. And that's just who I am as a leader. So I said that, and I sort of announced it at one of these town hall meetings, right, with all of my employees in January. We sort of do a state of the company every January. I share with everybody where we landed last year, where we're headed this year, all of those fun things. So I announced it everywhere. Everyone's excited. And then I kind of sat down and was like, oh my God, how on earth are we going to hit 100? We didn't even hit 100. What are you thinking, you crazy? I look in the mirror, I'm like, you crazy person, get it together. Like, you got to actually hit this marker. And so I remember this moment of realization for myself. And I said, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I don't know how we're going to hit 115. I couldn't map it out for you. I couldn't say, I'm going to go after the, I couldn't have done that for you. My brain doesn't necessarily work in that way, right? Like,
Mhm.
not for those things. And so I just said, I put it out into the universe and I said, you know what? If we're supposed to hit on 115 this year, give it to me. Like, tell me I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to give 110% and I'm going to encourage my team to do the same, but that's it. That's all that I can do. And so it was like 2 days later, I get a call from a huge nationwide company. In within like 3 months, we were on track to hit that mark. And I just remember being like, oh, was it really that easy all along? All I had to do was just give it up and ask.
Right.
But to succinctly, recap though, I think when we do what we're passionate about, we show up every day, we do the work. I'm not saying it's just, you just like put it out there and you're like, oh, please give me a new Corvette, and it's going to show up in
Right.
your driveway. But you show up, you're doing the things that you're supposed to do, that you know you need to do, and you're following that passion. Like, the rest will come. Like, just trust the process. So, in
Mhm.
a nutshell, that's my leadership philosophy. Maybe that's a little woo woo-y. I don't know.
Awesome. No, I love it. Um, you've got to believe in what you're doing, and if it's in your heart and you're passionate about it, you as a leader, you have to understand that not everything is in your control. And you've got to
Yeah.
have faith that, like, all right, we've set these goals. I know in my gut that we can do it. We're going to put everything in place so that we can do it. Now let's go.
Yeah.
Um, Ashlee, any final thoughts before we wrap it up for today?
Chris, I just want to thank you. This has been such a fun journey to go down with you. Yeah, I have loved every minute of this process. I really appreciate you, and I've just started listening to some of your podcasts. So everybody that's listening in, you're that much smarter than me because you've been listening longer than I have probably. And I just think that what you're doing out there is so important. I think really, if we equip our leaders, this world will be such a better place. And so that's my final thought is, thank you everybody that's listening in. I mean, you're signing up and you're saying, I'm here to be a better leader, right? I'm here because I want to learn more and I want to do more. And so I think, to that point, I'll just say this: no matter where you're at in your leadership journey, the fact that you're here is really a good indication that you're on the right track. So whatever your goals are for your own leadership, you know, end game, right? Maybe you want to start your own business, maybe you want to move into management, maybe whatever it is, just know that taking this first step really is, just listening is the first most important and probably the hardest part of it all. Right after that, you lean into what you love, you keep being willing to learn and to grow, and looking for those opportunities, and you'll get there. So I hope that the listeners got something out of our fun chat today, and I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ashlee, where can people find you? If they want to connect, they want to learn more about what you do, what your companies do, um, share
Yeah.
where folks can find you.
Absolutely. So, my CEO role at Guardian Protection Force, you can follow us on Instagram at GPF. So, like Girl Paul Frank underscore Inc. INC. So again, on Instagram for Guardian Protection Force. My new startup, if you're interested in kind of learning that journey or learning more about what does um, a technology company, a security operations center look like from the ground up. We're really trying to do a good job of documenting that whole startup process because A, I want to remember it, and B, it's pretty cool to watch. So that's
Mhm.
at Guardian Secure Solutions on Instagram. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, I sort of dabble in both, and just sort of talk through leadership things in the security world. And that's at guardian.ceo. So all of those on Instagram. We're also on LinkedIn and Facebook. So if you just search Guardian Protection Force or Guardian Secure Solutions, our LinkedIn and Facebook are more business forward, right? So if you think you need some security consulting, some security solutions for your organization, Guardian Secure Solutions can operate nationwide. Guardian Protection Force is based and licensed in the state of California. So wherever your listeners are, definitely something for you. If you just want to hear more about my crazy journey, probably the best way to do that is follow my Instagram at guardian.ceo, or I'm also on LinkedIn. So that's Ashlee Cervantes Thomas on LinkedIn, just the way you see it here.
Awesome. And those links will be down in the show notes. So anyone, if you're listening while you're driving or you haven't taken any notes, the links will be in the show notes. Ashlee Cervantes Thomas, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know that there were some nuggets of knowledge that people will be able to take away from this.
I sure hope so. Thanks, Chris.
I guarantee it. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. If you got something out of this episode, which I know that you did, please like it. Please share it with other people that you think could get something out of this episode that they can apply and be the best leaders that they can be. Subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of the content going forward. And like I always say, I'll see you next time, and lead on.